I dropped out of school to support my boyfriend, Sean Carter, through his PhD. But after he achieved success, he cheated on me with a female student and divorced me. After a car accident, I was reborn. Returning to the day I decided to drop out of school, I stormed into the principal's office and said firmly, "Sir, I'm not dropping out." The principal adjusted his glasses and looked at me. "You're Emily Brown, right? Fine. You can stay. But first, you'll need to pay the $8.904.90 in outstanding tuition and fees." He glanced disdainfully at my faded school uniform and added sarcastically, "When you aced the entrance exam, we thought we were bringing in a golden phoenix. Who would have guessed that in just 6 months, you'd plummet from first place to 500th? While the principal continued his tirade, my grandmother, Helen, burst into the room, carrying a large woven sack. Without a word, she began shoving all my belongings into it, declaring, "If she's not going to school, these can be sold to the recycling station." The principal smirked and remarked, "Mrs. Brown, that's not the best way to phrase it. And about the tuition, Emily was in the top 10 for the entrance exam. We only waived the fees because of that." My grandmother retorted, "You waived the fees because she was supposed to get into a top university. Now, she can barely qualify for a decent community college." Back in middle school, I had excelled, achieving top scores. But high school was different. The curriculum was harder, and success required both talent and time. While other students attended evening study sessions, I worked night shifts at a convenience store. While they went to early morning classes, I delivered milk. All the money I painstakingly saved was spent by my so-called brother, Jake, on video games. As my grandmother and the principal argued, they completely ignored me. I grabbed the sack from her hands. "I'm not dropping out," I shouted. Helen, who had just been scolding the principal, turned her wrath on me. "What do you mean? You're not dropping out? Your father just died. We have no income. And your brother still needs to go to school. What are you going to do? Be as unlucky as your dead mother?" Furious, I shouted back, "Jake isn't even my real brother. You brought him here to maintain some imaginary family legacy. You don't even care if your own granddaughter goes to school." My voice was loud enough to attract attention. Teachers from the neighboring math department gathered at the door. Intrigued by the unfolding drama, Helen's lips trembled with rage. "Are you trying to kill me?" she cried. I shot back, "You seemed perfectly healthy when you hit me yesterday." I realized that if I wanted to stay in school, my only option was to expose the truth. High school students usually have too much pride to show their struggles. But I wasn't the same anymore. A nightmare-like decade had taught me that survival mattered more than dignity. I knelt in front of my grandmother, pulling up my sleeves to reveal red welts on my arms. "You're forcing me to drop out and marry some old man for his money? You mean that 40-year-old Joe Miller who can't even feed himself? I won't do it. Please, just let me stay in school. If I get into college, I promise I'll support this family." In my previous life, I dropped out, was forced into marriage, and ran away after injuring Joe. I stole an ID card and fled to the city, where everyone assumed I was working in a factory. Only Sean Carter found me, delirious with fever, desperate for love. I believed his lies, worked odd jobs to support him, and helped him get into South University. Why couldn't I go to college for myself? Supporting a selfish man had been pointless. This time, I was determined to fulfill all the dreams I had abandoned and make those who exploited me pay. The teachers, stunned by my story, didn't expect me to be so pitiful. Mr. Harris, the teacher who had recommended me for special admission, stepped forward. "Emily has been through so much," he said as he helped me up. Glaring at my grandmother, he continued, "Mrs. Brown, our school provided $5,000 in financial aid for Emily to enroll, and now you want her to drop out?" I had never heard about the $5,000 before. Helen shifted uncomfortably under the judgmental stares of the teachers. She muttered, "Girls grow up and get married anyway. Isn't it better for them to have a husband who knows how to take care of them?" Mr. Harris snapped, "Joe Miller is 24 years old. Emily is only 16. What you're doing is illegal." Faced with mounting criticism, my grandmother finally relented. Fine. She won't drop out. But I'm not paying the tuition fees. I breathed a sigh of relief. But my grandmother, Helen, quickly grabbed my arm and pulled me aside. If you want to go to school, you figure it out yourself. Don't expect a single penny from this family. Her expression was fierce as she stormed off, leaving me standing there. Mr. Harris stepped protectively between us, watching her leave. But I was now alone, facing an office full of teachers. The principal seemed to snap out of his moment of sympathy, realizing the situation. Wait a minute, he said, as if suddenly recalling something important. She still owes tuition and fees. This isn't something we've dealt with before. If the debt isn't paid, it falls on the administration to sort out. Mr. Harris, undeterred, spoke up. We'll waive whatever can be waived. I'll personally cover the rest, he said, patting my shoulder reassuringly. Turning to the principal, I asked, if I manage to get into Harvard, can the remaining fees be waived? The principal, who was in the middle of taking a sip of water, nearly spat it out. Harvard? Are you serious? This school considers it a miracle if we get a single student into a top-tier university like MIT. And you're talking about Harvard? I wasn't able to study before because I didn't have time, I explained. But his skeptical look made it clear he didn't believe me. Fine, he said, shaking his head. Next week's final exams will tell the truth. Take a look at your scores before you start making such bold claims. Even Mr. Harris seemed doubtful, though he tried to encourage me. Emily, don't stress about the fees. If you really feel guilty, you can repay me after you graduate and start working. I nodded silently. I knew that proving myself would be the only way to change their minds. Go back to class and tidy up your things, Mr. Harris said with a gentle smile. When I entered the classroom, it was the middle of break, and the room was as lively as a marketplace. But as soon as I dragged the woven sack into the doorway, the noise stopped, and everyone stared at me like they had pressed pause on a remote. I walked over to my old seat, but someone else was sitting there. It was Dylan Reed, a boy who fancied himself the class comedian, but more like a cheap knockoff. His face twisted in annoyance as I approached, and he gestured to the desk, which was covered with his tattered books, literally falling apart. Why are you back? He sneered. With your grades, you might as well drop out. You couldn't even get into a community college. I looked at him calmly. Move your stuff. Dylan clearly wasn't expecting me to talk back. His face turned red with anger. If you're dropping out, then do it already. Go get a job and save yourself the tuition. The room erupted in laughter. The humiliation of a former top 10 student like me seemed to bring them an extra dose of joy. I slammed my books onto the desk with a loud thud. At least I got into this school based on my grades. I shot back, my voice steady. Not like you, who had to buy your way in. The room went silent. The first rule of fighting back against bullying is to aim for the leader. Dylan's face twisted in anger and nervousness. Everyone knew he had cheated his way through every test using his phone, but no one dared to say it out loud. Until now. I don't know what you're talking about, he sputtered, his voice rising. You're just mad because no one likes you. No wonder everyone says you're. I cut him off before he could finish, my tone deliberately mocking. Oh, so that's what they say about me? Interesting. My words hit their mark. Dylan was fuming. His face flushed. Before he could retort, the bell rang. Our English teacher, Mrs. Harper, nicknamed the Terminator, strode into the room. Her scowl was enough to make everyone's hearts sink. Her mood was clearly sour, and the class braced themselves for another one of her infamous rants. It's bad enough that this class scores lower than the other sections on every test, she began, slapping a stack of papers onto her desk. Some of you can barely scrape together a 40 on an exam that requires no more effort than throwing rice on a scantron and letting a chicken peck the answers. Today, we're going to fix that. One mistake in the dictation, that's 100 points off. Her fiery gaze swept the room. You, she barked, pointing randomly. And you, come up to the board. Dylan, sensing an opportunity, raised his hand. Mrs. Harper, Emily said she knows how to do it. I froze as his malicious grin spread across his face. It was obvious he wanted to embarrass me in front of everyone. He said I could do it? That's hilarious. Has he forgotten what happened last time he tried writing on the board? Our English teacher, Mrs. Harper was already annoyed with my poor grades. Seeing my incomplete and unverified exam sheet made her even angrier. Emily Brown, if you mess up even one word, you'll write it out 200 times for me. Dylan Reed chimed in, eager to add fuel to the fire. Mrs. Harper, I want to try too. I glanced at Dylan and gave him a small smile. His face froze in surprise, clearly not expecting me, someone who usually kept quiet, to challenge the Terminator. Mrs. Harper impatiently gestured for us to come to the board and start the dictation. First, I wrote slowly, deliberately. Dylan sneered, practically gloating. If you can't do it, just admit it. Save us all the trouble. But soon, his mocking stopped. The words got harder, and I picked up speed, my memory sharp and precise. Mrs. Harper raised an eyebrow and stepped closer to observe my writing. She stood silently next to me, clearly noticing that I hadn't made a single mistake. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Dylan frantically scribbling, trying to copy my words. An idea struck me, and I began to write in elaborate, overly stylized English. What the heck is this chicken scratch? I heard him mutter, which only made me smile and keep going. When the exercise ended, Mrs. Harper silently graded our work. She dismissed the groaning students and told me to follow her to the office. She looked like she had something to say but hesitated. I broke the silence. Mrs. Harper, I know my grades have been poor because of family issues. Could you please give me another chance? Before she could respond, a few other teachers who had gathered in the office chimed in on my behalf. Reluctantly, Mrs. Harper agreed, but with her usual sharp tone. Fine, you can stay. But since you're here, you can help carry these assignments back to the classroom. Her tone softened slightly as she handed me the stack of papers. I turned to leave and noticed someone standing in the doorway. It was Brian White. Mrs. Harper gestured at him, her voice now surprisingly gentle. He's here to help you. Brian looked at me and said, How did you end up like this? If you ever need help, just let me know. We were classmates. After all. Hearing his calm, steady voice, I couldn't help but remember how he had once stood up for me in the cafeteria during one of the darkest times of my life. He had been one of the few bright spots in those bleak years. But now, I quickly pushed those thoughts aside and nodded. Thanks. But you're in the way, I said, brushing past him. When I returned to the classroom, I found my book soaked with water. It was you, wasn't it? I asked, looking directly at Dylan, who was trying to look innocent. His guilty expression gave him away. Got no proof, he muttered. Don't go accusing people. I glanced around the room. The others either avoided my gaze or smirked at my misfortune. No one stepped up to help. Their indifference stung. But I knew I couldn't afford to waste my energy on petty revenge right now. There would be time for that after the next exam. I dragged my woven sack to the back of the classroom and found an empty corner near the window. Sitting there was Brian White. Brian was known as the Scholar King. From the moment he had joined this school, all anyone ever saw of him was the back of his head as he focused on his studies. Even our homeroom teacher, Mr. Gordon, was too scared to reprimand him, likely because his family had funded the construction of the school's teaching building. I remembered the kind boy who had defended me in the cafeteria, and wondered how he had become so distant. Most people avoided Brian, but there were no rumors of him being a bully. As I sat down, the noise of my movements seemed to catch his attention. To my surprise, Brian opened his eyes. His skin was pale, his pupils a light, almost transparent color, and his expression was utterly unreadable. Yet I could sense the words "I don't care" in his demeanor. Do you mind if I sit here? I asked hesitantly. I asked Brian casually, do you mind if I sit here? But my hands were already moving to organize my things. His voice was low and calm, like a gentle stream. You've already settled in before asking me. I smiled. That's because I know you're a good person. Brian, still a teenage boy despite his aloof demeanor, turned slightly red at the ears. His voice, however, remained cold. Don't disturb my sleep. When I glanced up, I noticed the shocked expressions of the girls sitting nearby. Their faces were filled with disbelief. Oh my God, Brian didn't push her away? How can she sit next to the school's golden boy? Whispers spread across the classroom. One girl muttered, if it were that easy, I would have sat there myself. The commotion didn't bother me until I saw Sean Carter enter the room. He hadn't been in class earlier. Word was he'd been preparing for the upcoming English competition. The school had only one spot, and he was the favorite to take it. I couldn't help but feel bitter. Why should this spot go to a guy like him? Later, during dinner time, the classroom was mostly empty except for me and Sean. As soon as I walked in, he stood up and approached me. "Are you okay? I can grab some food for you from the cafeteria," he offered. I stared at him steadily, my eyes unblinking. This was the moment in my previous life when Sean and I had begun to develop feelings for each other. Two lonely people, one an orphan, the other practically abandoned, had found solace in each other. I still remembered the way he had vowed to get into a good college to prove wrong all the people who looked down on him. I also remembered how he cried when he decided to repeat a year of school. And, of course, I would never forget the way he had emotionally manipulated me, forcing me into a divorce later in life. How much of his kindness back then had been genuine, and how much had been calculated? Before I could respond, a voice cut through the room. "Oh, look at you. Playing house. The two of you. Broke as can be. Pretending to date like you're in a romance movie." It was Lindsay Chun, drawing out her words dramatically to get a laugh from her little group of friends who had just entered the classroom. Lindsay, with her curled hair and delicate features, was notorious for being the class sleeping beauty. She could sleep through every lesson except the homeroom teachers. Now, holding her lunchbox, she smirked at me. "Bringing food is what dating looks like for you too?" Without looking up from my books, I replied casually, "Why do you know so much? Are you dating someone yourself?" My tone was light, but my words hit a nerve. Everyone knew Lindsay spent her days exhausted because of her late-night gaming sessions. And after high school, she'd fallen into an online relationship that ended with her getting pregnant before even graduating college. Her face darkened, clearly not expecting me to strike back. Furious, she stormed toward me, grabbing from my books to throw them. I shoved her away without hesitation and looked coldly at Sean, who stood frozen nearby. He always valued his pride too much. Anytime things got messy, I was the one who had to deal with the fallout. He stayed clean while I got blamed. Lindsay's friends weren't about to let her lose face. They rushed over, scattering the contents of my woven sack everywhere. Enough. I kicked the desk aside and launched myself into the fray. Chaos erupted as books and bags flew, and within moments, the five of us were hauled to the office by our homeroom teacher, Mr. Gordon. Mr. Gordon, a math teacher with a stiff gait that made me suspect he suffered from chronic hemorrhoids, slammed his hand on the desk. "What's the matter with you girls? Fighting like this? We're supposed to be a prestigious academic class." His frustration was palpable as he glared at us, clearly at a loss for how to handle the situation. "Don't you feel ashamed of yourselves? If you don't want to study, just go home." Mr. Gordon's voice boomed through the office, and I, standing closest to him, couldn't help but rub my ears. "And you, Emily Brown." He pointed at me. "You're the worst. I try not to criticize the girls too much. But you? Your grades are terrible. Your behavior is disgraceful. And you've caused the class to lose how many conduct points with your fights, tardiness, and early departures." He went on to explain, rather loudly, that those points affected his monthly bonus. "I'm only doing this because I need to make a living too," he added. "I was late just once," I muttered defensively, "and I admit that was my fault. But the fight wasn't started by me." "Save it," Mr. Gordon snapped, cutting me off. He wouldn't believe me. Of course. After all, Lindsay Chun was his niece, and I was just the class troublemaker. Lindsay, who had stayed silent until now, suddenly raised her hand. "Mr. Gordon, Emily isn't just a bad student. She's been trying to seduce Sean Carter. I was confronting her about it, and that's why she attacked me." Sean was one of the school's best prospects for getting into a top university, which meant he was directly tied to Mr. Gordon's bonus. The moment Lindsay said this, Mr. Gordon's anger flared. He picked up a book and threw it at me, though Mr. Harris quickly stepped in to block it. "Mr. Gordon," Mr. Harris said calmly, "accusations like seducing someone shouldn't be thrown around lightly. Shouldn't you ask Sean for his side of the story first?" Soon after, Sean was called into the office. Mr. Gordon's voice was sharp as he demanded, "Did Emily ask you to do something inappropriate?" This had never happened in my previous life, but I already knew exactly what Sean would say. True to form, he hesitated briefly before responding, carefully crafting his words to seem innocent. "Emily asked me to grab her some food from the cafeteria," he admitted. His face was pale, the same shade as his uniform. "I didn't mean anything by it." His explanation gained momentum as he spoke, trying to justify himself. "She also asked me some questions about homework." "What subject?" I cut him off abruptly. "English," he stammered, clearly caught off guard. "English?" I couldn't help but laugh. "You're telling me a former service worker who could easily converse with foreigners would ask you for help in English?" "Mr. Gordon, he's lying," I said firmly. "First, the food was for him, not me. Second, I've never asked him for help in English. My scores might not be the best, but I don't need his help." I refused to let anyone smear my reputation without fighting back. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Lindsay and her friends growing visibly nervous. "You, with a score of 25 in English, dare to say you're better than Sean?" Mr. Gordon grabbed the grade sheet and flung it at me, the bold 25 glaring back at me in black ink. I stared at it, then lifted my head. "Fine," I said, my voice steady. "Let's wait for the finals. See for yourself. Anyone can talk big." Mr. Gordon sneered. "If your English score doesn't meet the standard, you won't stay in this class. You'll be sent to the regular track." A challenge had been laid down, and I had no choice but to take it. Looking at the pristine English textbooks on my desk, my heart wavered. It had been so long since I studied properly. Could I really pull this off? As I tapped my foot anxiously, Brian White, sitting beside me, frowned slightly. "Can you stop moving?" "Sorry," I said sheepishly, then quickly followed up. "Since you're already annoyed, can I borrow your study materials?" Brian didn't respond but pushed a set of books toward me. The textbooks were immaculate, like they'd been prepared to sell to the next batch of students. I opened one, flipping to the table of contents. The modules were neatly divided. The purple sections were for second-round review for seniors, and the red sections were for first-round review. Each module included multiple choice questions, reading comprehension, and task-based reading exercises. "Are you actually reviewing, or just flipping through books?" Lindsay's mocking voice rang out from across the room. Others, noticing how quickly I was turning pages, joined in the laughter. "Is this the legendary quantum reading method?" someone joked. "She's reading a book in 25 seconds flat. I think 250 suits you better," someone mocked. But I ignored it, focusing on the book in front of me. In English, vocabulary is king. During my time working as a waitress to earn extra money, I had picked up conversational fluency in 2 languages. While I might not be great with grammar, my vocabulary was decent. Everyone knows that English comprehension is a bit like a guessing game. If Sean Carter had claimed I asked him for help with math, I might have been at a loss. But English? Not likely. As I was lost in thought, Brian White suddenly kicked the table lightly, silencing the room. "Can you all shut up?" he said, his voice cold and cutting. Lindsay Chen, who had been sneering at me, froze like a duck whose neck had been squeezed. Her face turned red with embarrassment. Being rebuked by the class's golden boy wasn't something she could brush off. Fighting back tears, she ran out of the room, presumably to complain to the homeroom teacher. I let out a quiet laugh. Did she really think the teacher would confront Brian over her? Brian suddenly broke the silence. "I thought you didn't have a problem with me," he said, his voice calm but probing. "Do you think I'm some kind of bully?" His perceptiveness caught me off guard. I quickly shook my head. "Of course not. I've just been having a toothache. That's all," I replied with a forced smile, hoping he wouldn't press further. He said nothing, but I took the opportunity to help tidy up his desk, arranging his books and pens meticulously. "Don't worry. When you sleep, I won't bother you," I assured him. In my past life, my brief interactions with Brian, whether in the classroom or when he had helped me in the restaurant, had given me some insight into his preferences. I knew how he liked his books stacked and his pens placed. As I worked, Brian seemed like he wanted to stop me but hesitated. We have similar habits when it comes to organizing things, he finally said. His voice almost awkward, like he was making small talk. The faintest trace of color crept up his cheeks. I didn't mean anything by that. I know, I said with a genuine smile. I believe you. He said nothing more. But his silence spoke volumes. That moment, I didn't realize just how much my words, I believe you, meant to him. As expected, the homeroom teacher, Mr. Gordon, didn't reprimand Brian. Lindsay returned, still sniffling, but kept her distance, clearly avoiding further humiliation. The rest of the evening passed smoothly. My first evening self-study session since being reborn felt strangely satisfying. I even found myself reciting passages from the Ballad of the Pipa Player, the melancholic tone of the poem oddly fitting my situation. But reality hit hard once classes ended. Unlike the other students, I didn't have a dormitory. I had to go back home. Our old 600-square-foot apartment in the rundown part of town was the only valuable thing my father had left us. The master bedroom was occupied by my so-called brother, Jake Brown. The second bedroom belonged to my grandmother. As for me, I slept in a tiny makeshift room in the living room. When I got home, it was already 10 p.m. The house was filled with the sound of a girl's sweet laughter from Jake's computer as he played games. Double kill, the game announcer blared. After taking a quick shower, I had just stepped into my cramped little space when Jake emerged from his room. His greasy hair was dyed a sickly yellow, and he was panting after just a few steps, his overweight body glistening with sweat. His eyes darted to places they shouldn't, making my skin crawl. "Give me $500, he demanded, his voice grating. "I need to buy a new skin for my game character." As he said the word skin, he even licked his lips. "Your skin's not bad already," he added, his tone sleazy as he reached out a chubby hand toward me. I slapped his hand away. "Are you insane?" I snapped. "Try that again, and I'll break your hand." One simple decision, not dropping out of school, seemed to have triggered a butterfly effect, unraveling years of pent-up tension. "What are you afraid of?" Jake sneered, stepping closer. "It's not like we're related by blood." He lunged at me, trying to cover my mouth. But before he could touch me, my grandmother appeared out of nowhere, grabbing a table lamp. She smashed it against the back of Jake's head with a loud crack. Jake collapsed, groaning in pain, struggling to get back up. But his bulk betrayed him. His attempts to move only made his flesh jiggle as he whimpered. "What the hell are you doing? Hitting your brother?" my grandmother shouted, completely ignoring what had just happened. Without even asking for an explanation, she stormed toward me and grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my skin. As I waited, I called the police. Yes, I reported Jake Brown as a stranger I didn't know. The moment my grandmother, Helen, heard me on the phone, she panicked, scrambling to grab my phone but falling flat on the floor in the process. "What kind of horrible luck is this? How could you do this? If you get your brother arrested, how am I supposed to live? How can I face your father?" she wailed, her voice shrill. Jake, still dazed from the blow, stumbled toward me, reaching for my phone. I sidestepped him and bolted down the stairs, not stopping until I reached the building entrance. I waited there, heart pounding, until the police arrived. 2 officers approached, calm and professional, and accompanied me back upstairs. As soon as we entered the apartment, Jake started groaning, pretending to be gravely injured. One of the officers asked me gently, "Is this the person you were talking about?" "Yes," I replied, voice trembling as I clung to my performance. "I'm so scared of him. I don't even know who he is." "What do you mean you don't know him?" "He's your brother," Helen protested, shuffling toward us in small, frantic steps. "Officers, this is all a misunderstanding. They're siblings. I'm an only child," I said firmly, tears streaming down my face as I hid behind the officers. "I've been away at school, leaving early and coming home late. I've never seen this man before." "What do you mean you've never seen him?" Helen screeched. "Your father just passed away, and Jake's parents sent him to live here 6 months ago. Do you have any official paperwork for this arrangement?" one officer asked, his tone unimpressed. "Without legal documentation, this doesn't hold up." "But they're relatives." He's just a child. He doesn't know any better. Helen argued, her desperation almost comical as she gestured toward Jake, who was far from looking like a child. I handed over evidence, a recording from my old, battered phone. The officers played the audio, which clearly captured Jake's threatening words. For once, Jake had nothing to say. Seeing that the situation wasn't in her favor, Helen softened her tone, pleading, Emily, he's your brother. You can't let them take him away. He's going to be a government worker one day. Government worker? I scoffed inwardly. Jake, who had barely managed to get through vocational school and was on the verge of dropping out, becoming a government employee? The idea was laughable. I ignored her tantrums as the officers escorted Jake out. Watching him leave, Helen realized I was no longer bending to her will. She grabbed my clothes, twisted them angrily, and spat. You're cruel. Fine. Don't live here anymore. This is your brother's house. Get as far away as possible. And don't expect a single penny from the Brown family. With that, she slammed the door shut, locking me out. I stood there, my belongings stuffed into a small bag, staring at the closed door of the house I had lived in for 16 years. Homeless and with nowhere to go, I wandered into a 24-hour KFC and spent the night there. In my previous life, I had run away from this home and never returned. Jake had gone on to inherit everything, including my grandmother's estate. But this time, I wasn't going to let that monster have it so easily. The apartment was legally under my father's name, and by law, I was entitled to at least half of it. Still, with final exams looming, I had to focus on more immediate concerns. Sighing, I opened the vocabulary book I had borrowed from Brian White and started studying under the dim light of dawn. By 5 a.m., I was fully immersed in my notes, repeating words and phrases to myself. At 6:30 a.m., for the first time, I skipped my usual part-time job and went straight to the early morning reading session at school. There weren't many students there yet, but one of them was Sean Carter. Unlike Brian, who excelled naturally, Sean had only been able to attend this school thanks to a sponsorship. He was the kind of student who had no choice but to study relentlessly to hold on to a fleeting chance of success. Back then, I had admired his determination. I remembered how he had promised to get into a good college to prove everyone wrong. I also remembered how, years later, after earning his PhD, he refused to marry me. I admired Sean Carter for his relentless drive and how harsh he could be on himself. For 9 years, through 4 degrees, he had pursued his PhD with single-minded determination. When he finally achieved it, our relationship seemed stable. I had waited so long for that moment, quiet and composed. Sean had once told me, Emily, I hope we can spend the rest of our lives together. But when the time came, his response was, I need to think about it. That thinking stretched on for 3 years. Sean graduated and moved on, while I was left behind. It wasn't until I miscarried, emotionally wrecked, that I cornered him. You told me we'd be together forever. Why did you change? Why? I had screamed, my voice full of despair. I couldn't accept it, couldn't believe it. Our home, once whole, was now split into 2 irreconcilable parts. Sean, the ever-polite and eloquent professor who could chat casually with cafeteria staff, no longer spoke a word to me. To everyone else, it was common knowledge. Professor Carter had married a country bumpkin. The narrative was simple. A desperate woman smashing dishes and breaking rules to force him into marriage as repayment for past debts. With his signature coldness, Sean had said, I can repay you for all the money you spent over the years. If you're willing to divorce me, I'll return everything. And why didn't you say that when you were retaking your exams? Or when you needed tuition for college? Or when you needed to pay for those expensive prep courses for grad school? I had asked, my voice shaking with despair. Now that you've made it, you just brush me off like this? Am I supposed to lose everything? 30 years old, bitter and seething, I walked out of the house and was hit by a car. That life ended in an instant, and all those memories came flooding back. Now, watching Sean skip breakfast without so much as a glance in my direction filled me with disgust. He had the gall to approach me after class, though, with his typical composed demeanor. I'll talk to Mr. Gordon about yesterday's bet, he said, looking down at the book in my hand. Is that Brian White's book bag? Don't get too close to him. We're not like them. Not like them. I repeated, my tone sharp. What does that mean? Are poor people automatically supposed to be noble and virtuous? I knew Sean's sore spots and wasn't afraid to jab at them. He turned pale, visibly unsettled. About yesterday, he began, his voice weak, self-serving and exploitative. That's your motto, isn't it? Sean, the real difference between us is that we don't walk the same path. I shot back. Before he could respond, footsteps echoed in the hallway as students began to filter in. This is my seat, Brian said, arriving earlier than usual. His tone was calm, almost indifferent, but the words were enough to send Sean scurrying away like he'd been gravely humiliated. I watched his retreating figure, a mix of satisfaction and pity in my chest. Final exam prep week flew by in a blur. It was a week of near-endless self-study, leaving everyone exhausted but focused. The mental strain was so intense that snacks became a necessity. Some girls' desks resembled mini convenience stores, filled with enough food to last an entire semester. Mine, however, was the opposite. Not only was it far from a snack-laden paradise, it was practically barren. This week, I finally learned what it felt like to run on empty, both figuratively and literally. Brian, looking groggy from sleep, arrived with a strand of hair sticking up stubbornly. The disheveled look somehow suited him perfectly. Sorry, I mumbled, chugging a cup of hot water to calm my stomach. With only $200 to my name, I was budgeting tightly. That money had to last me through meals and consultations with a lawyer about my inheritance rights. For now, I was surviving on one meal a day and sheer willpower. You should eat more during finals, Brian muttered. Irritated, he rummaged through his bag and pulled out a piece of bread, handing it to me. When I hesitated, he frowned impatiently. I bought it myself. If I gave you something from my desk, it would disrespect the people who gave it to me. Brian's words were unusually plentiful today. It explained why his desk was stacked with food like a warehouse. Gifts from people he didn't seem to care about. He never gave anything away, but neither did he eat most of it. No wonder so many people secretly admire you, I said as I bit into the bread. If you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all, Brian snapped, his head already lowered as if preparing to sleep again. Still, the tips of his ears turned red at my comment. Maybe I can help you with math, I offered, half seriously. I genuinely wanted to repay Brian for his kindness, since he had plans to study abroad. His English couldn't possibly be poor. Meanwhile, I had gained some confidence in math after my recent study sessions. Brian silently opened both of our previous test papers. One had a glaring red 25, mine, and the other a 66, his. Even though my math is terrible, are you sure you want to tutor me? I asked. I was actually pretty decent at math in middle school. You know, do you believe me? Time passed quickly as I continued mooching off Brian's bread every morning. Soon enough, the day of the finals arrived. The moment I walked into the exam hall, I was greeted by Mr. Gordon's piercing death glare. The seating arrangement was based on academic rankings, and as the lowest-ranked student in my class, I had been placed with the general track students in the lab. A girl with a bob haircut sitting next to me poked my arm. Let's help each other out. Okay, she whispered. Before I could respond, Mr. Gordon's stern voice cut through the air. Some people need to stop thinking they can cheat so openly. I'll be watching you closely. I raised my hand calmly. Mr. Gordon, I'd like to take my test near the front. The lighting is better there. If I was going to be under scrutiny, I might as well sit where no one could accuse me of cheating. I settled myself near the teacher's desk, determined to avoid any traps. The first exam was language arts. This subject relied heavily on foundational skills, and even without regular classes, I could manage the basics. However, having spent the past week focusing solely on English and math, I left the outcome of this test up to fate. I filled in every blank and wrote carefully, ensuring I didn't leave anything unanswered. When I glanced up, I noticed Mr. Gordon glaring at me intently, while other students were left to their own devices. His eyes were glued to me. Our gazes met, and I calmly looked away. I'd long grown immune to such disdainful stares, having faced plenty of them in my past life from Sean's colleagues and peers. The math exam came next, and to my surprise, Mr. Gordon was once again the proctor. It seemed he was determined to catch me slipping. I remained composed, pretending not to notice as he stood directly in front of me, watching me work. "Mr. Gordon," I said politely, "you're blocking my light." Out of the corner of my eye, I spotted the principal walking past the classroom, monitoring the exams. Mr. Gordon's actions had already crossed the line of permissible behavior, and the principal quietly reprimanded him for disturbing the students. Feeling vindicated, I focused on my test, finding it surprisingly smooth sailing. Moments later, a crumpled piece of paper landed on my desk. I glanced up just in time to catch Mr. Gordon glaring at me as he stormed off. "Ah, I knew you'd cheat," he muttered, his voice dripping with disdain. Before I could say a word in defense, he grabbed my test paper. "You think the lab cameras aren't recording? We'll deal with this after the exam." He turned to the class, holding up the paper. "Who threw the answers? If you're smart, you'll own up now." The classroom fell silent, tension thick in the air. Mr. Gordon's frustration mounted, and soon, 3 other grade supervisors arrived. After collecting the test papers, we were told to remain in the room while the surveillance footage was reviewed. It didn't take long for the culprit to be revealed. The girl with the bob haircut had thrown the note, and her round face was now pale with fear. She kept glancing at me, as if the word accomplice were written across her forehead. Her pitiful acting could have earned her a spot in the worst historical dramas. I sighed and raised my hand. It was her. "Mr. Gordon. She's the one who tried to pass the answers to me. I made a mistake trusting her." The girl's voice was unexpectedly loud as she jumped up, shouting, "It was her. She asked me to pass the answers." I hadn't anticipated her to play the victim so brazenly. Before the exam, the 2 of them had indeed been whispering conspiratorially. Mr. Gordon seized the opportunity to reprimand me further. "Emily Brown, I never thought you'd stoop to cheating. Of all the students in the academic track, you're the first to do something like this." Tears streaming down her face, the bob-haired girl wailed, "Just admit it. If we confess, the teacher won't punish us too harshly." "Who gave you the right to frame me?" I asked coldly, fixing her with an icy glare. "I don't even know who you are," I said coldly, pointing to the evidence. "Everything is right here. How dare you still deny it?" Mr. Gordon looked triumphant, his expression akin to a scientist confirming a long-held theory. His face flushed with self-righteous certainty as he declared, "You're bad at studying, and your character is even worse." But I wasn't about to back down. "I have evidence too," I said firmly, flipping to the last question on my test. This question about moving points. I don't believe the person who threw that cheat sheet could have solved it. Look at them. They're from the lower-ranked group. I don't buy that they could answer this. The grade supervisor stepped in to review the situation. Sure enough, my solution to question 20 was written out in full detail, while the cheat sheet only contained answers to basic multiple choice and fill-in-the-blank questions. Why would I need their answers if I can solve a problem like this? I added confidently. "Then why didn't you answer the earlier questions?" the supervisor asked, catching a potential inconsistency. "I didn't have time," I said without hesitation. The truth was, I'd only reviewed moving point problems during my prep sessions. I hadn't even glanced at other topics, and it was thanks to Brian's offhand explanation that I had finally understood this type of question. He really was like a hidden genius. "I can write it again for you right now," I offered. Noticing Mr. Gordon's hesitation, I grabbed a pen and strode to the blackboard. I began solving the problem in front of everyone, narrating each step as I wrote. The girl with the round face, who had been trying to frame me, was stunned into silence. She had assumed I was only capable of scoring 25 on a test. "Now, do you want to explain why you tried to frame me?" I asked, turning to her. She was quickly escorted out, but not before implicating others. Lindsay Chun and, unexpectedly, Brian White were also questioned. Brian, however, returned quickly. "I'm sorry for dragging you into this," I said, feeling genuinely apologetic. "It's not your fault," Brian replied with a slight shake of his head. It was then that I learned the full story. The round-faced girl had a crush on Brian, and Lindsay had manipulated her into believing that I was shamelessly pursuing him. That misunderstanding had fueled her actions against me. If it weren't for me, you wouldn't have failed your math test, Brian said, his voice tinged with guilt. His eyes even reddened slightly, and while his handsome face made the sight almost poetic, it was clearly abnormal. That's the victim-blaming fallacy, I said, trying to comfort him. You can't blame yourself for what others do. That's like blaming a tree for being knocked down by the wind. Brian's eyes softened as I continued. I trust you. I always have. I repeated the words he had once said to me in another life, giving them back to him. Hearing his low, steady voice again made my face inexplicably warm. Why do I keep thinking about Brian? I wondered. It must be because he's so good-looking. I quickly brushed off the thought, focusing instead on the scene around us. No one seemed to notice my flushed cheeks, as everyone's attention was on Dylan Reed, who was animatedly recounting how Mr. Gordon had been reprimanded. Apparently, the principal had reviewed the surveillance footage and scolded Mr. Gordon for hovering around me during the exam, accusing him of poor proctoring and bias. With that bit of good news, the English exam arrived. I casually reported Dylan's use of his phone to cheat, a small act of revenge that left me feeling quite pleased. However, my good mood was short-lived. Just before entering the exam room, Sean Carter appeared, blocking my path. I'll speak to the teachers on your behalf, he said, his tone serious, before walking away without waiting for a response. His presumptuousness made my blood boil. What does he mean by that? I fumed. Does he think I'm doomed to fail? Fueled by frustration, I entered the exam room with renewed determination. In the English exam, I wrote with unwavering focus. This time, without Mr. Gordon deliberately making things difficult for me. The process went smoothly, and I submitted my paper without issue. The chemistry, biology, and physics exams also concluded without incident. Now, all I could do was wait for the results. As I packed up my desk, I mentally prepared for a summer of intense study to catch up on the 6 core subjects where I still lagged. Are you planning to keep sleeping at KFC over the summer? Brian White asked, surprising me with his rare initiative to start a conversation. Perhaps he still felt a bit guilty about the cheating incident. It's summer. I'll manage, I replied lightly, already planning to sort out my inheritance issues with the help of a lawyer. How about I tutor you? He offered after a pause. His voice measured, $200 per session. I blinked, momentarily speechless. The cheating incident wasn't your fault. You know, I said. But tutoring? Yeah, that might actually be helpful. Brian's gaze shifted to the math section of my desk, but I quickly pressed my hand over the exam sheet showing the glaring red 25. That was just a fluke, I muttered defensively. Brian nodded, handed me a phone number, and said, call me when you're ready. Awkward silence followed until I sheepishly admitted, I don't have a phone. Embarrassed, I pocketed the number, deciding I'd have to figure out a solution later. The next day, I sought out Mr. Harris. Do you know any lawyers who might offer assistance to minors? I asked hesitantly. Mr. Harris took my situation seriously and reached out to an attorney named Mr. Sue. This student of mine is underage, he explained. Please help her as much as you can. I couldn't help but feel grateful. Mr. Harris, I'll work hard and get into Harvard one day. You'll have to give interviews about how you taught me. He chuckled, brushing off my words as a joke. Emily, I don't care where you go, as long as you give it your best. That's all that matters. The day after finals, the results were posted. My English score? 132. Not only was it the highest in my grade, but it also placed me among the top 10 in the entire school. The news spread like wildfire. Early that morning, the grade supervisor ran to the second-year teachers' lounge to announce it. Teachers gathered to congratulate Mr. Gordon, assuming Sean Carter had achieved the top score. Mr. Gordon, already smug, feigned humility. Oh, Sean's always been exceptional in English, he said, his face red with pride. He clapped Sean on the shoulder when he arrived, saying, well done. A 132 on this difficult test is almost unheard of, even in the best schools. Sean looked puzzled. I don't think I did that well. Maybe the grading was lenient. Nonsense, Mr. Gordon said dismissively. Who else but you could score that high? From outside the office, I could hear the commotion. Walking in confidently, I followed Mr. Harris, who had already spotted me and smiled knowingly. Mr. Gordon was pulling up other grades for comparison when he finally looked up and saw me. His expression soured instantly. Sean scored 132. The highest in the grade, he declared, emphasizing each word. Really? Mr. Harris asked, tilting his head as he reviewed the results. Mr. Gordon, perhaps you should check again. The grade supervisor, unable to stand by any longer, spoke up. Mr. Gordon, maybe take another look at the names. I already knew the truth from the way Mr. Harris had smiled at me. The results were read aloud. Language arts, 99 math, 40 English, 132 physics, 40 chemistry, 29 biology, 30. Congratulations, Emily, Mr. Harris said warmly, breaking the awkward silence. Your English score is outstanding. As for my math score, everyone in the room understood that Mr. Gordon's constant interference had cost me valuable time. Had I been able to finish, I would have easily secured a passing score. Mr. Gordon's face turned pale, then flushed red with frustration. This is impossible, he sputtered, his confidence shaken. This is cheating, Mr. Gordon declared, his face a mixture of disbelief and frustration. This exam was created by the Academic Research Department. There are no answer keys online. A nearby teacher, clearly unable to tolerate his outburst, whispered, There's no way the answers were leaked. The questions don't exist anywhere else. The room buzzed with murmurs as the teachers debated. Sean Carter stood frozen, looking as though he'd been struck by lightning. His face betrayed both shock and humiliation. Mr. Gordon, do you see it now? I said sharply. I didn't ask Sean for help, and I certainly didn't try to seduce him. In fact, I despise him. My voice trembled with anger as memories of my past life surfaced. The 10 years of emotional neglect, the pain of losing a child, and all the sacrifices I had made for him. The fury in my voice was unmistakable as I continued. This happened because you, Mr. Gordon, failed to investigate properly. Emily, don't worry. The supervisor interjected. We'll have Mr. Gordon apologize to you. I don't need an apology, I said coldly. All I want is to transfer classes. Sean, his confidence shattered, stumbled out of the room. Despite securing the top spot in the grade overall, he had placed second in English. For him, that was an unbearable blow. But this was only the beginning. In the next year, I would chip away at his reputation, turning him from a small-town academic star into a small-town failure. Determined to keep moving forward, I approached the English teacher. Thank you for your guidance recently, I said sincerely. I'd like to participate in the upcoming English competition. Is that possible? The teacher, pleased by my initiative, nodded enthusiastically. Of course, I've been impressed with your skills for a while, but there's only one spot available, and you'll be competing with Sean. When Mr. Gordon caught wind of this, he arrived with Sean in tow to intervene. One test score doesn't prove anything, he argued. Sean has been the top student in our class year after year. The English teacher hesitated, visibly torn, so I made a bold move. Let's have the grade supervisor, Mr. Bay, organize a live competition, I suggested. Mr. Bay, understanding the importance of fairness, agreed and brought in other English teachers to oversee the event. The news clearly hit Sean hard. His face contorted with a mix of pain and anger. What did I ever do to you to deserve this? He asked, his voice low and bitter. It's all for the school, I replied with an air of righteousness. The competition adds extra points for college applications, and every opportunity matters. You'll lose miserably, Sean said through gritted teeth. As word spread, other students gathered to watch. Some whispered cruel comments. She gets one good score and suddenly thinks she's the best? What a joke. Another added, she's probably cheating again. How else would someone like her dare to challenge Sean? The teachers distributed the test materials, TOEFL speaking prompts. We would listen to the prompts and respond in real time, a task that tested vocabulary and comprehension, but wasn't overly reliant on grammar. It was almost tailored for me. Sean went first, confident and well prepared from his prior competition training. He spoke fluently and performed well across all sections. His pronunciation was impeccable, and his vocabulary impressive. Even the English teachers nodded in approval. Lindsay-chan and her clique, gathered around Sean, laughed loudly. "Hurry up and get down from there. Emily, don't embarrass yourself," Lindsay jeered. "She's wearing those old clothes like it's a competition for beggars, not a real contest." Ignoring them, I raised my hand and stepped onto the stage. As I began speaking, my fluent English and advanced vocabulary immediately caught everyone's attention. I didn't just answer the questions. I infused creativity and flair into my responses, turning even the driest prompts into engaging narratives. Years of working customer service jobs hadn't been for nothing. When I finished, I glanced at the English teachers and saw their approving smiles. I knew I had secured the spot. "Sean Carter, in this life, I will clip your wings. You will not soar to college or beyond." Afterward, my request to transfer to Mr. Harris's class was approved. Everything seemed to be falling into place. Though I felt a pang of regret at leaving Brian behind, I silently resolved to help him improve his math skills over the summer. Meanwhile, the legal proceedings for my inheritance moved forward. "Emily, the court has accepted your case," Mr. Sue, the lawyer, informed me. "Since the property ownership is clear, the decision will come quickly." "That's great news," I replied. "Once the house is officially mine, please help me sell it as soon as possible." I didn't want to live in that house at all. As soon as I hung up the phone with the lawyer, I saw Brian White approaching. Unexpectedly, my grandmother and Jake Brown were there too. Jake had been released after just a few days of education due to being a minor. Standing not far away were two middle-aged strangers squatting nearby, watching the scene unfold. "Ungrateful brat. Drop the lawsuit," my grandmother shouted, hurling her usual string of insults. "Since when do girls fight for property? Houses are for boys, not you. You can take that argument to court," I replied coldly. I had no idea how they had found me, but I started packing up my books to leave. Jake suddenly grabbed my backpack. I turned to glare at him, my icy stare making the flesh on his face tremble. He let go. "Next time you show up in front of me, I'll beat you up. Every single time," I said, my voice sharp and unwavering. The middle-aged couple blocked my path. "Hey there. You're grandma, right?" the woman said in an overly familiar tone. "We're your grandma's distant cousins, here to mediate. Look, you just focus on school. We won't stop you. When the time comes, we'll even help arrange your marriage. Your brother will carry you to your car when you leave. After all, we're family." Their intentions were transparent, calculated and self-serving. My grandmother had clearly roped in these distant relatives, all for the sake of her so-called family legacy, even if it meant sacrificing me. The sourness in my heart grew. Did they expect me to feel grateful for the privilege of going to school? "There's no room for negotiation," I said firmly. "From now on, pretend you don't know me." When the woman reached out to grab me, I darted to the side and shouted, "Human traffickers." Thankfully, we were in a shopping mall, and security arrived quickly. No matter how much the four of them protested, they were soon thrown out. Before they left, I turned to the woman and said coldly, "Don't come looking for me again, or I'll make sure your son has no descendants. Try me." Within days, Mr. Sue, the lawyer, informed me that the matter had been settled. The house would be split evenly between my grandmother and me. The distant cousin bought my half at half the market price, giving me 300.000 yuan. How she planned to care for my grandmother was none of my concern. I later heard they converted the downstairs storage room into a tiny bedroom for someone who it was meant for. I neither knew nor cared. With the money, I bought a phone and sent Brian White an apology message. "Sorry, I didn't have a phone before. There were a few emergencies, and I couldn't contact you. It wasn't intentional." I still felt a little guilty about skipping the first tutoring session. To my surprise, Brian seemed more concerned than annoyed. That day, "Who were the others besides your grandmother? You can tell me," he said, his voice unusually serious. "You said you trusted me, didn't you?" he added softly, his worried eyes meeting mine. I felt myself falter under his gaze. Finally, I told him everything. "Do you want me to help you?" he asked, his tone sharp. his usual indifference completely gone. His uncharacteristic anger caught me off guard. I couldn't help but pinch his cheek, attempting to lighten the mood. I can handle it myself. Brian's face turned crimson. You can't just do that. I'll get the wrong idea, he muttered. His eyes filled with a burning intensity that made even the sunlight seem dim by comparison. I chuckled awkwardly, trying to deflect. We're about to enter senior year. No time for misunderstandings. To prevent further questioning, I jokingly invited Brian to help me bag Jake. Brian reluctantly agreed, though his mood seemed unusually off that day. Please, let me go. Don't hit me anymore. Jake's cries echoed through the alley as we left him lying in a heap. Footsteps sounded in the distance, and Brian grabbed my hand, pulling me away quickly. I couldn't stop laughing. That was so satisfying. Thanks, Brian. You're welcome, he replied, his eyes sparkling as he glanced at me, but just as quickly. His usual calm demeanor returned, like a mask falling back into place. Time passed. Finals came and went, and soon, we graduated and started college. I'm waiting for you to explain this misunderstanding, Brian said as we finalized the number of tutoring sessions and the schedule. I rented an apartment and packed my daily review sessions with tasks, leaving almost no gaps. Effort determines your baseline. Talent defines your ceiling. Getting into a school like Tsinghua isn't something you can just wish for. It requires deliberate action. Before I knew it, summer vacation ended, and the new semester began. I had prepared a parting gift for Brian. We won't be desk mates next semester, so here's something for you, I said, handing it over. Brian looked up from his papers and tapped his test sheet. I didn't prepare any farewell gifts. You getting into a top-tier university will be the best gift for me. I smiled at him like a proud mother, trying to hide how pleased I was. Sure. You're like an old man now, I teased. Brian reached out and ruffled my hair. The next day, to my surprise, I ran into Brian in Mr. Harris's class. My dad's donating another building to the school, he explained casually. Might as well use the privileges while I have them. He unfolded a math test sheet and pushed it toward me. Solve these if you can. They're not easy. You paid for another custom-made test, didn't you? I muttered, already drawn to the challenge. Math is a subject that rewards time and effort. What you put in is what you get out. I couldn't resist seeing where I stood, so I dove in immediately. Escaping Mr. Gordon's class was a blessing. In Mr. Harris's class, Brian and I studied under a more self-directed model, while the class material was less intense than the elite track. Mr. Harris encouraged independent study, setting tasks for us to complete on our own, and offering targeted help during evening sessions. The approach suited me perfectly, and I watched my grades climb steadily. Each exam brought me closer to catching up with Sean Carter. What thrilled me even more was seeing Brian's progress. His scores were improving just as consistently, and his support kept me motivated. 310, 155, 66. Serena recited my rankings from the last 3 exams as if they were a chant. You're rising faster than a rocket. How is this even possible? I'm just lucky to sit in front of a genius, I joked, but her admiration was genuine. His 66th place is nothing, chimed in Lindsay Chun, always quick to inject negativity. You've got a long way to go if you want to catch up to me. Even in our own classroom, there were always people who couldn't resist being spiteful. Why don't you keep your comments to yourself? Lindsay, Serena shot back. And you, Lindsay's little minion. What's your rank? Huh. Zoe Reed, Lindsay's short-haired sidekick, smirked. At least I don't brag about going to Tsinghua when I've only managed 66th place. I may not make it to Tsinghua, I replied calmly, but I'm still leagues ahead of you. I turned to Lindsay. How about a bet? Next exam, whoever ranks lower has to stand at the school gate and shout, I'm a loser. 3 times. Lindsay hesitated. Her grades good enough to know my rapid progress was a real threat. Afraid? I teased, using just enough goading to bait her. Who's afraid of you? She snapped. Fine. A bet's a bet. Pulling Serena along, I walked back into the classroom. Brian was still napping at his desk, looking far more refreshed than he had in previous semesters. At least now he could stay awake in class. Serena, clearly still fuming from Zoe's snarky comments, buried herself in solving problems. Her gossip forgotten. "You're definitely going to surpass Sean Carter this time," Brian said softly, his voice calm but certain. He knew better than anyone how hard I'd been pushing myself. I had compressed 2 years of high school coursework into 1 semester, planning my time so rigorously that even drinking water was scheduled. "I won't fail," I said firmly. I couldn't afford to. Not with the college entrance exams on the horizon. The mock exam will be brutal, but I'm ready. Beating Sean is my main goal. Taking down Lindsay is just a bonus. I clenched my fists in determination, but Brian caught one of them in his hand. "You can study for revenge if that's your motivation," he said, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. "But remember, you're doing this for yourself, too. A good university will give you more options, and it'll help you leave behind the people who've caused you so much pain." His words struck a chord. Free motivational quotes. Huh, I joked, trying to lighten the mood. "Got it. I'll keep fighting." When the results of the mock exams came out, Mr. Gordon's disbelief was almost comical. "The top score in the grade? From a general class? That's impossible." But the name on the results didn't lie. Emily Brown. Even Mr. Harris, who had grown used to my meteoric rise, couldn't help but smile. "One more semester. 130 days to go," he said. "At this rate, I wouldn't be surprised if we send a student to Tsinghua. Not bad for a special recruitment student." Huh. Another teacher joked, earning a round of chuckles. "Look at these scores. Getting into Tsinghua or Peking University won't be a problem at all." One of the teachers exclaimed, marveling at my results. "Ever since Emily joined Mr. Harris's class, everyone's study habits have improved. Congratulations." Hearing compliments that should have been directed at him, Mr. Gordon's face twisted in frustration. The prestigious title of Tsinghua student's homeroom teacher had been snatched away from him. Unable to accept it, Mr. Gordon stormed off to find Sean Carter. "Sean, you were always better than him before. You were specially recruited too. There's no reason he can get into Tsinghua while you can't," Mr. Gordon said, his voice full of expectation. But Sean looked utterly defeated. The pressure was crushing him. As I walked past, I kept my gaze straight ahead, ignoring him completely. Brian's advice to let go of revenge echoed in my mind. Maybe it was time to stop holding on to the past. However, Serena had other plans. She dragged me to Class 1, where Lindsay-chan turned bright red as we approached. "Lindsay, you haven't forgotten what you said, have you?" Serena asked pointedly. I just knew you'd fail," Lindsay stammered. "Your grades are bad, and your character is even worse." "Defeated loser," I interrupted, throwing Mr. Gordon's own words back at Lindsay. Brian was right. Sometimes it's good to throw out a cutting remark. It's therapeutic. This time around, my goal was to distance myself from the toxic environment that had surrounded me. The second semester of senior year brought 2 major events. Congrats, Emily. You scored 1 point higher than the top student in the district on the 3rd mock exam, Serena exclaimed, ever the gossip queen. "And guess what?" she continued eagerly. "Sean Carter's grades are slipping fast. He's almost out of the top 100 now." Sean's inability to handle pressure was showing, but this time his self-directed harshness was backfiring. He wasn't punishing others. He was punishing himself. "Enough," I said, cutting off Serena's gossip. "There are only 20 days until the college entrance exams. Let's focus." "Brian, Serena, where are your test papers? Let me grade them for you," I teased, holding out my hand. Serena screeched in protest, but Brian remained as calm as ever. On exam day, as I finished the last question on the biology test, I felt the meaning of the word completion for the first time. Depending on others was futile. Only by relying on myself could I truly control my destiny. After the exams, I treated Brian to a farewell meal. "This time, it's a real goodbye," I said, handing him a carefully wrapped gift. Inside was a Switch console I had saved up to buy. Brian accepted the gift but then looked at me seriously. "So, are you finally going to explain that misunderstanding?" I froze. He still remembered. In the aftermath of my parents' divorce, I became a child without a home. I began. No matter where I lived or what happened, I was always the one being blamed. No one ever believed me. You were the first person to tell me. I believe you. Brian's pale skin flushed as he interrupted me. I like you. Be my girlfriend. The faint blush on his face made him even more handsome, but the wounds from my past life ran deep. I was terrified. I bolted. I don't like long-distance relationships. I blurted out. I'm sorry. Walking away. I regretted my decision. I should have just given him a basketball instead of a Switch. That would have been simpler. My frugal heart wept silently. After that meal, I threw myself into part-time jobs. Later, my mango orchard project unexpectedly became a sensation. I harvested a mango weighing 697 grams, the largest in the province. The school's official account cleverly spun the achievement into a celebratory post, circumventing the ban on publicizing top scores. The school went wild, celebrating with 3 days of fireworks and handing out mangoes to anyone who wanted one. As the big mango herself, I received the highest level of attention. What about Brian? I asked Serena, who was brimming with excitement about her own exam results. Do you know how he did? Serena hesitated. He went abroad. Adults can stay friends even after rejection. Right. Her words hit harder than I expected. But I forced a smile. Serena had done well on her exams, and her gossipy spirit seemed to have only grown stronger. What about Sean? She added. I heard he barely got into a second-tier university and is planning to retake the exams. I brushed off any mention of Sean, too preoccupied with my own worries about Brian's results. When I asked Mr. Harris, he just smiled and said the scores were confidential. It seemed Brian hadn't done as well as he'd hoped either. I felt a pang of heartache for Brian and sent him a long, heartfelt message filled with encouragement and motivational advice. His response was curt. Too much. With that, I figured my energy would be better spent working part-time jobs. Meanwhile, Brian seemed to be traveling. Every new destination came with a post on his social media and a postcard sent to me. A rainy day in Iceland, the blazing sun in Argentina. Each place felt like a piece of his journey. It wasn't until I borrowed Serena's phone one day that I realized the truth. Those social media posts were only visible to me. Come back soon. School's about to start. I messaged him. Let's go together to Tsinghua's opening ceremony. My dad will take you to see the place. Brian's reply was brief. See you at the auditorium. I was puzzled by his response. Without me, how would you even know where the auditorium is? I teased. On the day of the ceremony, I finally understood. How did you even get in here? I asked, staring at the student ID card he casually flashed. Maybe my dad donated another building, Brian said with a small smile. Then, to my surprise, he gently pulled me into a hug. Here's your reunion gift. Now that we're on the same campus, we're not in a long-distance relationship anymore. Are we? The realization hit me all at once, leaving me speechless.